With Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 264, we pick up where the last one left off, and it's full steam ahead for what is shaping up to be a rather controversial as well as poetic chapter in the franchise itself, as it is slowly adding more layers to the final conclusion of the story. We open up with Yuji punching the ground to imbalance Sukuna's footing. It's a smart move by Itadori that shows his situational awareness and his understanding of the dire stakes of the situation at hand, because he is increasing the chances of Jacob's ladder hitting on Sukuna. And we're once again seeing that rather unorthodox fighting style that only a country bumpkin like Itadori would ever think to use right there in that very moment, in that very situation. Another example of he's so simple-minded that it makes him brilliant. Sukuna, as a result, starts to climb up towards Hana in the midst of being hit by Jacob's ladder, and we start seeing Sukuna show off more of his confidence in spite of his increasingly messed up situation that he finds himself in. This is basically Sukuna at the poker table, pushing all of his chips to the table itself, and he's calling the bluff of all the other players and is ready to stand on business, let the cards fall wherever they might fall. It's Gege making us as readers blitz through the panels faster with our eyes, because this whole scene, it is pulling on our emotions. After everything Sukuna has done, all the beloved characters he's tormented and all the beloved characters he's killed, this is the moment where you want to say to yourself that they've done it, they've won. And yet in the back of your mind, Gege has done such a good job of breaking your heart over and over again as a reader. You don't want to feel hope, but this time you can't help but feel this time is different. And that's what makes all of those moments where Sukuna cheats death and kills a beloved character feel so earned, because this is the payoff of what we're getting. So Sukuna states that unlike Jacob's ladder that was applied to Yuta's domain, this Jacob's ladder will also affect Yuji and Todo. So if he climbs a pillar of light, he should be able to make it to Angel without being interfered by anyone else. It's a calculated gamble, and based on Angel's reaction, it might have been the correct one had Sukuna been in a perfect scenario. So Angel tells Hana, get away, but Sukuna, he's already behind her, fully prepared to attack, and as he does so, we see Sukuna's very keen perception is already being put on display again for readers. He notes that the output of Hana's Jacob's ladder, it isn't on the level of what we saw when she previously used it in the culling game, and he vows to make use of the time he has before he's ripped apart from Fushiguro by making Angel suffer. For a moment, you can't help but think of how is he going to do that after all this non-stop battling. Yet once again, Sukuna later on in the chapter is going to display one of the rules of the verse that we've seen time and time again when it comes to the effects of Black Flash. So essentially, he uses the first Black Flash, which leads to Todo intervening and taking the brunt of the attack to protect Hana. This completely blows Todo along with Hana away, and it's in this moment that Sukuna, he gives Todo the rarest of compliments, which for a man like Sukuna who only truly values strength, he acknowledges Todo's strength for surviving the attack and says that he is truly a jujutsu sorcerer. Now this is a really big deal given Sukuna's character arc and the things that he values, and how throughout this arc in general he's been shown battling the strongest in various ways. Getting this compliment from Sukuna is like Patrick Mahomes telling you you're a pretty good quarterback. So Sukuna, he's battled Gojo, the strongest man of this modern era, in a very intense knock him down, drag him out slobber knocker of a fight that showed every aspect of the battle system in Jujutsu Kaisen. He battled against Kashimo, who was considered the strongest during his era, in a battle that wasn't necessarily a barn burner per se, but it was still an effective battle nonetheless, even if the ending was underwhelming. He battled Okotsu, the prodigy of this generation, who had the potential to be the strongest, and battled him again when he was possessing the body of Gojo, the strongest of this era. Now he's acknowledged Todo, which is really amazing, just given when you go all the way back to Shibuya, we weren't even sure that this guy would even be around by this point in the story, yet look where he's standing. We then see Sukuna noticing that Hana and Todo, they are unable to move, so he begins to start making the decision on who he's going to finish off in what order. But what we see happen next is a reflection of Sukuna's one mistake he has constantly made throughout the series, which is underestimating Itadori, the one who he always calls a brat. Yuji just pops up out of Jacob's ladder itself, and this shocks Sukuna because in spite of the damage, Itadori is just rushing towards him, and before Sukuna can truly get going, Yuji lands a solid punch on Sukuna's face, then he grabs hold of his leg and he smashes him down on the building. And this, my friends, is that moment where the anime starts showing you that this is the moment where the main character has truly arrived, and and he's begun to show the villain why their days are numbered, because in the words of Orame, they are starting to come true, that Yuji, at this rate that he's growing, might end up being an equal to Sukuna. Even though Sukuna laughs off Yuji at every turn, that's what makes this next sequence so crazy, because Sukuna is finally being forced to acknowledge Yuji. So just as Sukuna appears out of the building, Yuji tries to again disrupt Sukuna's footing by using Shrine, but Sukuna is one step ahead because he punches Yuji away with his remaining arms, now regenerated, because as the narrator tells us, due to hitting an additional 2 black flashes, Sukuna has regained his reverse curse technique, which now raises the stakes in a major way. Sukuna, he was already dangerous. Everyone knows that, but he's now that floor boss in a video game who's had time to recover his energy and his health bars, which means you've got to strap in because this fight, it is far from over. Sukuna grabs hold of Yuji and he lands several punches on him, and he eventually knees Yuji right in the face, effectively ending whatever modeling career aspects Yuji might have had before they ever got started. He's fighting with a level of ferociousness that we've come to expect with Sukuna. We just associate savagery with Sukuna, but as he's fighting Yuji, we see Sukuna in deep thought. He thinks to himself that Yuji's dismantle, it targets the boundary between himself and Fushiguro, and he thinks to himself that it's basically practically useless if Yuji isn't able to hit him. And so we see him making his game plan, and it's a very effective game plan, yet this is where it gets super interesting. So Yuji isn't giving up in spite of all of Sukuna's efforts that follow, and that brings us to the flashback of when Gojo took the Jogo fight as the opportunity to teach Yuji about how domain expansion works, and he breaks down everything before we get that iconic moment where Gojo first used domain expansion in the anime, which automatically catapulted domain expansion into that category with Bankai and Sage Mode and Super Saiyan in terms of how iconic it is. Yuji never forgot the most important aspect of domain expansion, which is that it has a sure hit effect when used inside of a barrier, and this leads to Yuji busting out his own domain expansion on Sukuna, and suddenly Sukuna's confidence that Yuji's attacks won't hit him, so he wouldn't have to worry about his soul being split from Fushiguro, they suddenly are massively misplaced feelings of confidence. This is where it does get interesting, because once again, that short time skip where everyone was training, it is coming back as the ultimate cheat code. Very fitting given that Yuta referred to it as them cheating. Basically, when they were using the body swapping training, Yuji learned the basics of how to pull out domain expansion by training under Kusekabe. This leads to a very iconic scene. Sukuna looks up baffled as to what has happened as Itadori approaches him from the train station and tells him, "Let's go, Sukuna." And this train station scene, it has so many layers to it that rewards everyone who's been paying very close attention to both the anime and the manga. So first of all, if you go back to the anime opening from season 1 of the anime, we had Yuji on the train, and at first he's by himself, not surrounded by any of his loved ones, and in the journey of Yuji in Jujutsu Kaisen so far, we've seen him lose Nobara, his fellow country bumpkin, Nanami, one of his teachers in a way, Fushiguro, who got his body taken over by Sukuna, and he lost Gojo, his sensei, the one who saved him from execution. Whereas before he was on the train to an unknown destination, Yuji is now at the train station, either having gotten off of the train that you saw in the anime opening, or he's about to get on the train himself, which now makes that moment where in the anime opening, you see Yuji with that downtrodden face. Now you start asking questions. Now, the other thing is that this flips on the head all of Sukuna's previous kills, and it does so in a very iconic and ironic fashion, where we have to believe somewhere Gojo is just laughing his ass off. He woke up inside the airport and he just started cussing because he knew immediately, like, oh man, this dude killed me. Now Sukuna, he's in a train station, no longer in Fushiguro's body, and he's back in the body that he had when he shared one with Itadori. The other thing that this is doing is that, barring a bait and switch, it's setting Gege up to pay off Yuji's character motivations that we get told up front at the very start of the series. Yuji was very set on making sure the people, they had a proper death, and now that he and Sukuna are alone with no one to interfere, Yuji has a chance to give Sukuna a proper death in a way that he sees fit, and this is where the irony comes into play. Sukuna spent the whole series never taking Itadori seriously, yet look exactly where he is now. Yuji is now on the precipice of being responsible for his downfall, and Sukuna is forced to acknowledge Yuji in a way that he's never done before. Even if he busts out some crazy cheat codes, since Sukuna always tends to have some kind of binding vow up his sleeves, or he has some crazy antic maneuver he can pull out. The fact that he would have to resort to something like that, it just proves that he was wrong all the time about Itadori. Gege in this one moment is so very close to making Sukuna go out the way that Gojo did, where just when Gojo thought he won, he lost. But this time, if Yuji's able to finish the job that none of the strongest in history have ever been able to do, Sukuna will be forced to learn that the strongest, it isn't just about having physical might, but it's what Gojo alluded to in the airport after he died, a line that a lot of people looked over, where he said that his fists weren't able to reach Sukuna and make him understand love. And what better person to make Sukuna see the power of love than Yuji Itadori? Someone who wears his heart on his sleeve, someone who loves extremely hard and has lost so many people who he loves, especially now that he's been a Jujutsu sorcerer. Yuji is the perfect person to either push Sukuna deeper into a corner or make him see the truth, which of course we won't know how this ends up in terms of how successful it is until we move on to the next chapter.